and welcome to another edition of the Mayor Dan Paletko Show. I'm very pleased today to have as my guest Cristy Rankin, who is the Director of System Emergency Management for the Beaumont Health Organization, and we're going to talk about the new organization. So Cristy, thanks for joining me on my program today.
Well, thank you for having me.
So you're when did the new name and the whole reorganization, that just happened in the last 6 months, or?
It's actually been, we celebrated our 1-year anniversary a few
Okay.
months ago. Yes, it's been a year, and this is an entirely new system. We joined together with the former Beaumont Health System, and then Botsford, which was a single hospital, and then of course the Oakwood healthcare system. We've all joined together to form it's a completely new entity called Beaumont Health.
Okay.
So it has been a year, but as you could imagine, joining together something of this size does take some time. So, things have kind of been, progressing over that year.
And I know some of our residents, because I remember visiting Dearborn Heights residents at Botsford. Was that a separate entity, or were they affiliated with one of the two hospitals before?
No, it's an interesting question. No, Botsford was one of the final remaining single hospitals in the Metro Detroit area. They did not have an affiliation prior to this.
Now, a lot of Dearborn Heights residents, and in fact, the Dearborn Heights Fire Department utilizes the emergency. So would one still say that they've gone to Oakwood, or what would be the proper terminology now?
Very good question, and that's also taken a little time, including those of us that worked for Oakwood before. The hospital has been renamed as Beaumont Dearborn. And as a matter of fact, all of the hospitals have been renamed as well. We now have Beaumont Health now has 8 hospitals. The 3 former Beaumont, the Botsford, and then the 4 Oakwood. And the same naming convention has been used at each site. So all of them are Beaumont and then the city that they're located in. So, for example, people may be familiar with what was South Shore Hospital downriver. Instead of that, it's now Beaumont Trenton.
Okay.
And same thing with Annapolis and Heritage. Those all changed as well. But yes, now you would be going to Beaumont Dearborn.
Okay. What are some of the pluses as a result of the organization being merged together then?
Well, there's a tremendous amount of pluses, mostly for our patients as well. We now have 8 hospitals, and we have 5,000 physicians. And what this is going to do is give all of our patients throughout southeastern Michigan access to a much larger network of physicians, of specialties, research. It's only enhancing care for all of our patients. And it's been a very nice coming together, in the few areas that I would interact with. It's very nice to be able to, everyone kind of brings best practices to the table. And, we brought things that were adopted for the new system. Beaumont brought their own stuff. So I think everyone will see this is a great thing for our patients as well as all of us who work there.
And I know, like in the municipal world, one of the things that we've been faced is costs keep going up, revenues are becoming difficult. In order to manage that, there are a lot of things that I do with Garden City as a city, with City of Dearborn.
Right.
We still keep our own identity, but at the same time, being able to take advantage of economies of scale. There's certain things that were being duplicated that you can save the money, and instead of having 4 of something, maybe you just have 1. Right. And they, like you indicated, best practices, and so you get that efficiency of the best group. And so that's got to be a plus. From a healthcare standpoint, though, people are always want the best care and make sure that they get everything that they can to help a loved one. Do the pockets like Beaumont, Oakwood, if I entered into the Beaumont family of doctors, am I, because I live in Dearborn Heights, more inclined to, if I need hospital care or surgery, they would take me to Beaumont, Oakwood, or is it the kind of thing that I'll be asked to go to the original Beaumont?
That would depend, I guess, on the circumstance that you needed surgery. In an emergency, obviously, you're going to the closest facility, and if it needs to be an urgent surgery, it needs to be an urgent surgery. If you kind of went through your primary care, or however you normally would have gotten to the point that you were diagnosed with a condition that required surgery, almost every hospital kind of has individual specialties, things that they have focused on and become certified in. So if you, let's say, came into Oakwood Dearborn and there was a particular surgery that Beaumont Royal Oak specialized in, they may suggest transferring you there for the surgery. A lot of that certainly depends on the patient's preference. We would never force people to go anywhere, but for certain things like open heart surgery, for example, Beaumont Taylor does not do open heart, so you could not have that type of surgery there. But it gives you a lot more options for specialists and things like that. That should you choose to go to a certain specialty, you now have a much wider network to choose from.
Yeah, I guess, and maybe I should rephrase it, that I was wondering if like cardiac conditions would be one, and there would be would these hospitals start to specialize in a particular thing? But it sounds like they'll be all-encompassing hospitals, and while they may have an expertise and maybe a doctor that if the condition called for it within this family of network, you might then be referred to a Dr. A that could be at another hospital. But generally, Beaumont Oakwood's still going to be all-encompassing, providing a whole array of services like they do now.
The hospital in Dearborn, yes.
Yeah.
Beaumont Dearborn, yes. Nothing is being removed from any of the sites, but just as an example, and most people may not be aware of this, not every hospital has labor and delivery. It depends a lot on geographic area, how many other hospitals in the area do things like that. So while there are certain things, every hospital has general surgery. They won't all have their own individual specialties. Any type of surgery the hospitals provide right now, they will continue to do so. But if it's something, again, very specialized like open heart, it would have to be, if you came into Taylor, you would have to be transferred to Dearborn to have that surgery.
And one of I remember writing letters and being asked to promote and to support. The Oakwood complex was a Trauma 1 center, which is, if I recall right.
2. They're level 2.
Level 2, okay. I can't say I know the difference, but they didn't have that designation, and they obtained it. And that was important because given certain kinds of emergencies, they could now provide care, and so that will still continue?
Absolutely, yes. Dearborn is a level 2 trauma, which means there's different criteria for each level of trauma center. They have to have 24-hour surgeons in-house, a whole trauma department. A lot of that is data collection. They do injury prevention. So within Beaumont Health, as far as our whole system, Royal Oak is a level 1 trauma. The real difference there is that level 1 requires a research component, and Beaumont Royal Oak, it always was a research hospital. So Beaumont Dearborn is a level 2 trauma. Beaumont Wayne and also Trenton are both level 3s, and I do believe Taylor's going for the certification as well. Because as the research into trauma has progressed over the years, and it really is a relatively new area of research, they call it the golden hour. In order for a trauma patient's likelihood of survival increases tremendously if they can get to definitive care within an hour's time, which seems like a long time, but there's a lot involved in that care. It's not so much just hitting the door. And we're very blessed. We all live, well, sometimes we may not like it with the traffic, but living in Metro Detroit, we've got a lot of options for hospitals. And a trauma network is actually run through the state. So there's a lot that goes into obtaining the certification, and they're certified through the American College of Surgeons. So most of our sites are trauma centers. And the difference between a 2 and a 3 is a level 3 may, if that's the closest facility, EMS is going to take the patient there. They would stabilize and transfer if necessary to a 2. But all of that is very important for citizens, and you know, especially important. You may not get taken to the hospital you want to go, you know, at that particular moment, depending on where the trauma happened. But when a hospital is a certified trauma center, that, you know, again, there's a lot that goes into it, but it also means their emergency department staff has been trained in trauma. As a nurse, there's a certification. It's a trauma nurse core certification, because there's, you know, over the years been a lot of research into caring for trauma patients, and, you know, all kinds of, you know, it's a specialized certification, things you need to know, and of course the equipment and things like that.
And we're very blessed in the Dearborn Heights area, given the certification that our firefighters, and
Yes.
I'm amazed at the fact that my fire department's going to have respond to over 7,000 calls this year.
Yes.
Which is a lot of calls. In fact, we're burning out our rigs quicker than we
Yeah.
expected, and those are about 180,000 apiece. But what I'm very pleased about is the fact that we only maybe get 5 or 6 complaints, I hope I don't jinx this, out of the 7,000, and those normally are billing issues. They're
Right.
not connected to service, but I know that the firefighters have told me sometimes that when they respond, like you indicated, depending on the level of the emergency, they may have to take that patient to the quickest hospital to stabilize them. But
Right.
having the trauma center in the area is really a very plus. So a resident in Dearborn Heights is going to get excellent service when the fire department comes,
Yes.
get transported to and get excellent care at the hospital. And if they need it, there's a good chance they're going to survive situations they would not if we were out in the middle of the country somewhere.
Right. Oh, exactly. And yes, I am an ER nurse by training, and I spent several years working in the emergency department at Beaumont, Dearborn. So I'm well versed with the skill of your firefighters. They're great. What a wonderful resource for your community. You know, and a lot of people don't realize what goes into being a paramedic as well. That is a tremendous amount of training, and they are very skilled at what they do.
I'm very proud of them. Hopefully I will not need their service, although one day when I broke my leg in City Hall,
Ooh.
they transported me. And I remember that I said, "Are you trying to go over every bump?" Because
Yes.
every bump I could feel where the fracture was
Ooh,
in the leg.
yes.
But and that was the second time I broke the same kneecap.
Oh.
Fractured it twice in 6 months. I had just gone and seen the
Oh.
orthopedic, and doctor said, "You don't need to come and see me. You know, just strengthen your muscles, keep your exercise." And that day, somebody brought some snow. It was February, and I came out of my office,
Oh.
did the splits, and once
Ouch.
again, I knew immediately, so I had to go through all that again. But anyway, so you indicated that your training is in a nurse, but now you have the title of Director of Systems Emergency Management. So how did you transition from emergency room to the job you have now?
Well, I guess, you know, when I worked in the emergency department, I was always one of those people kind of looking for extra challenges. And when I was at Beaumont Dearborn, they, you know, asked me to kind of start helping out with emergency management. And for anybody that may not be familiar with that term, emergency management within the healthcare setting is disaster preparedness, whether it's weather disasters, whether it's, you know, a mass casualty somewhere in the area that we have to be prepared to intake a great deal of patients. And it's not just having room in the emergency department that's going to affect the whole house, as we call it. And there are a lot of situations we need to prepare for, equipment we need to keep and maintain, training all of our employees, all employees have to go through. to make sure that we are prepared to serve our communities, because we're the hospital, we can't be closed.
Yeah, and this is an area that's been dear to my heart from the very beginning. We had a CERT program when a lot of communities did not, and in fact, Bob Ancrap, who's our emergency manager, and we put that level of importance on it, but being the fact that we have a major metropolitan airport, and I don't recall when, but when that one plane that was headed to Phoenix went down on Middle Belt, that just overtaxed the whole emergency response system. So those, and not to scare people, but you'd be surprised what is in tankers and other vehicles traveling Telegraph Road and Ford Road and the freeway, and there's pipelines. There's a whole many potential situations, and also occasionally we've had our SWAT team out because of a school incident or somebody's barricaded themselves, and those provide situations where you could have a lot of casualties. So we've done planning that hopefully we don't ever have to use, but nevertheless it is a very important thing, because
absolutely.
I don't know how many patients one could have. I've been in the emergency room at Oakwood, I've been at Garden City, I've been to quite a few of them. It seems like you have a lot of beds, but you probably couldn't handle 200 people at one time.
Well, it would depend on the severity of their injuries. If 75 of those people had cuts and scrapes, and your firefighters have received the same training as we do in the hospital, it kind of becomes what we would call a reverse triage situation. So typically in an emergency department, we treat the sickest people first. So, sometimes people waiting in the lobby get a little upset, but, once we have evaluated a patient, we have to, based on certain criteria, decide who needs to be treated sooner, if there's a backup. In a mass casualty situation, and again, any fire department or EMS providers, as well as hospitals, we work in reverse order. So if we had 70 people out of that 200 that had nothing more than cuts and scrapes, we would call those green. That's the walking wounded. So they may be moved to a different area where they certainly would be given attention, but we may have to use an ancillary area in the hospital. So the object of reverse triage is to do the greatest good for the greatest number of people. So those people are stable. And then you're looking, the next would be anybody, who is salvageable. Unfortunately, in those circumstances, sometimes people's injuries would not allow survival, because typically if we had someone that injured come in, not all, a lot of resources are going to be sent to that one person because they're coming in by themselves.
Right.
If we have 10 people like that or 20 people like that, it may not be possible. But the other thing too, and a lot of people may not be aware of this, not only do all the fire departments, you have mutual aid agreements, and everybody knows what they would send in the event of a large disaster. Hospitals also, we participate in actually 2 healthcare coalitions now, Region 2 North and Region 2 South. We're now spanning both regions, and these regions are kind of FEMA, what they refer to as biomedical regions. So Oakwood, Beaumont, Dearborn, look, I did it finally, is in Region 2 South. Region 2 South is comprised of about 35 hospitals in Wayne, Washtenaw, and Monroe counties. We meet on a monthly basis. We have plans in place for transferring patients to each other. There are protocols as far as dispersing patients should there be a huge mass casualty. And we have a wonderful service. It's called HEMS. It's the Health Emergency Management System. And we're very lucky in Wayne County that we have that. They kind of funnel through a lot of the ambulance dispatch traffic on a daily basis, but should there be a large event like that, HEMS would be able to coordinate all of the different fire services, and the Healthcare Coalition would be able they're in the same offices. So, okay, this hospital can take this hospital. There's actually a tremendous amount of planning that goes on behind the scenes, even within healthcare systems.
Now, this is a little bit outside, but one of the things that seems to me, and if you want to comment, it's up to you, but where people will go to the emergency room, but maybe it isn't really an emergency. What kind of things should people go to the emergency room, and what kind of things they should not?
Well, I can't say, I suppose, what they wouldn't necessarily. Obviously anything that is disrupting your breathing or making someone feel, any kind of difficulty or differences in their respirations, any kind of chest pain, and I talked about that briefly. We did a little public service announcement about snow shoveling, which has not been an issue yet, but I'm sure it will be. That's a big one. We tend to see a lot of cardiac arrests during, snow season, because you have, people who shovel snow, and when it's so cold outside, you don't realize how much exertion that requires, even with a snow blower. And cardiac symptoms can present drastically differently, patient to patient, especially women. Very few women ever complain of crushing chest pain, like the classic heart attack that people say they feel. And really probably only maybe 20% of patients actually have that crushing chest pain. It can be nausea, abdominal pain, shoulder pain, a variety of different symptoms. So anything that doesn't feel right, as far as things like that, definitely come to the emergency department. Anyone presenting with a symptom that might indicate a cardiac activity, we are within 8 minutes we'll have an EKG done. An EKG is going to give a quick snapshot of the electrical activity in the heart, and that's going to give our physicians an opportunity to look very quickly to see, that's the first step. After that, once we've got someone back in a room, there are different labs we run and stuff like that to kind of check all the way through.
Okay. So are you located in one spot, or you travel amongst the various hospitals in the system?
Well, my office technically is in Dearborn. It was in the former Oakwood Corporate Services building on Lundy Parkway, which is Ford Road in Greenfield. But my position, I go to all the different hospitals, whether they're having an emergency management meeting or exercises and drills, which every hospital has to do multiple of every year. I also interface with a lot of governmental agencies, whether it's municipal, the state, different things like that, county. So I spend a lot of time on the road.
Okay. And actually I won't forget the date. It was August 11th and 12th, over a year ago, but we all got inundated by a flood.
Yes.
And I recall being down near the emergency, and then you were totally underwater, and the sliding doors and the whole situation. Have you fully now recovered from?
Yes, they did. And hats off to the staff. They reacted very quickly, got all the patients upstairs. But there was extensive damage because of the floodwaters. It wasn't just the emergency department. The lower level of the hospital houses the pharmacy, houses the bulk of the kitchen as well. The more interior parts, were cleanable. The emergency department ended up, they kind of gutted everything and redid it. It's beautiful now. So they were kind of operating out of different area of the hospital for almost a year. But yes, they're back in business, and very nice.
My fire department actually went out with a rowboat to get people out of their homes, to get them to drier areas so they could then transport them. But that was, I had the opportunity to see the damage that was done at the hospital. I just could not believe the volume of water that had accumulated in that lower section over where the fire department kind of back
the ambulance
in. Ambulances,
Yes, it was, and that happened very rapidly as well. As far as I understand, it flooded in that bad within like 15 minutes. It wasn't a slow creep.
So is there any things that we didn't cover that you would like to say specifically about the new group, or did we cover most everything?
I think we covered a lot. I know, I guess speaking from a personal standpoint and just conversations, either at different meetings or just casual, I live in Dearborn. I was actually born at the former Oakwood Hospital, and so were both of my children. I know it was a big change, and a lot of people were a little bit distressed, because that was the original Oakwood Hospital. Of course, it only had the tower when I was born.
Which
a lot added on, but I guess, not only as an employee, but as a resident and a consumer of that hospital, this merger, our new healthcare system, is a great thing for everyone. It's very exciting. It will open up a lot of care opportunities for us, as well as, access to a lot more physicians and specialties and things like that for our patients.
Well, since you grew up in Dearborn, which high school did you go to?
Well, actually, I did not grow up in Dearborn.
Oh, okay.
I've lived in Dearborn 20-some years. My parents grew up in Dearborn. I spent a lot of time in Dearborn as a kid. But no, I did not actually grow up here. I just lived there about 20 years.
Well, I lived my first 8 years in Dearborn, off near Cherry Hill. I love a good park and that general area, but then we moved to Dearborn Heights.
Gotcha.
So, but I just wondered, didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, you're fine.
But Cristy, it was so nice to have you as a guest.
Thank you for having
we
me.
wish you and the hospital all the best. And hopefully we provided to the residents of Dearborn Heights that you can get great care at the Beaumont complex, and certainly want to thank all of you for watching another edition of the Mayor Dan Paletko Show.